Hi everyone, it's Kristen, and today we are going to talk about enhancing eyes. So I'm going to be really honest with you. I already went ahead and dealt with her skin and face. That'll be a different tutorial dealing with skin. Um, and also, when I'm doing normal edits, I like to use actions because it makes things go a heck of a lot faster. But just because you have actions doesn't mean that you shouldn't know how to do it the old school way, the longer way, not necessarily old school. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate this layer right over here. If you didn't see what I did, I right clicked on background and hit duplicate layer. That way everything we do is on one layer, and if we totally mess it up, we can always go back to the beginning. No big deal. So we're going to zoom into our eye, and we're going to talk a second about the structure of an eye. Here's the pupil. When light enters the pupil, it bounces back and then out into the camera. So you'll usually get, if you see here, here's the catch light. So here is where you can tell the light entered. This is where the light was coming from. This is where it's going to reflect into the eye. And sometimes the camera doesn't really pick that up. So we are going to just kind of enhance that a little bit and add some texture back in. Because if you notice, the eye looks kind of flat. It definitely has potential. You see like lots of little reflections, but it's still just kind of a flat color. So we are going to come up to adjustments, and we are going to hit the curves layer. It's the little grid thing here with the squiggly. I'm using Photoshop, by the way. I'm not sure if you can do this in Lightroom. I'm about 90% sure you can't. I'm really sorry. I won't be doing tutorials in Lightroom. Okay, so anyway, so we have this curves layer here. What we want to do is we want to take the middle of this curve right here, and we want to go all the way up, make it really bright. Maybe not that bright. Right about there. See, nice bright. You can see some of the details. That catch light I was talking about, where the light comes in and bounces out, is right around here. So once we do that, we're going to click the white box and Control I. And what that did is it made the layer invert so we can paint on what we just made with the curves. So you're going to grab your paintbrush over here in the nifty little tool area, and we are going to shrink it down. I am going to say probably 4 or 5. You don't want it too big because we're making texture, we're not just painting. We're going to come up here. You want your flow to be between 10 and 20. We're going to do 20. And opacity, I mean all the way up. We need to be able to see what we're doing here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to create lines around the pupil. So we're just going to start painting lines. And yes, it's monotonous. And you want to think of it as a bicycle spindle. So all the lines are coming from the center where the pupil is. We don't want to just be making lines this way or this way. We want them coming from pupil. Alright. Make sure to go all the way around. I'm going to go through and add a little bit more along where this area is. Alright, and let's zoom out a little bit, maybe. See, we're already getting some texture, and you can kind of see, in comparison to this eye, this is a lot more flat. This is starting to get some more interesting look to it. It's getting to be a little brighter. So once we've done that, we're going to go back in, and we're going to take our paintbrush again. We're going to make it a bit bigger. And we're going to switch it to black. And this time we're going to take the opacity down pretty low. We're going to say, let's say like 15, 16. And we're going to go, and at the top here, we're going to erase some of what we just did. because like we had said before, the light comes from this angle and it bounces back here. So up here and around the edges, the light we just added in is pretty unnatural. It doesn't really look like we're doing much, but trust me, we are. Also, I love how her eyes are 2 different colors. We're just going to add that in. Okay, once we do that, we're going to make sure this is highlighted. We're going to highlight the background layer we created. And we're going to right click and hit merge layers. That way we can kind of see what, turn it off, the layer on and off by hitting this eyeball. Ta-da! So we're getting there. So once again, we're going to right click, and we're going to duplicate this layer. Okay, and we are going to come up to filter, and we're going to go to camera raw filter. So basically this is just going to mimic the camera raw filter or the camera raw that you go through when you open an image for the first time. Hopefully you are shooting in raw. If not, I will definitely be making a tutorial on that. You have a lot more pixels and information to play with than if you save in JPEG. You will not get this when you start up if you just have a JPEG. But what we're going to do is we're going to bump up the light just a smidge. We're going to bump up that contrast. We're going to give a little bit more clarity. We're taking a look at what it's doing to the eye. We're not necessarily looking at the skin tone. The skin tone does not matter because we're going to paint it onto the eye. There is a curves in here. We're going to pull this down. This is the shadows. So there's typically 3 points. One's here for the shadows, this is the midtones, and this is the highlights. So we just added in some shadows. We're going to click here and bump up those highlights a bit. Alright. And we'll add a little bit more sharpening as well. Alright. Awesome. So now that we've done that, we're going to hit OK. So now we're going to come up to layer, layer mask, and we're going to hide all. So that's the not shortcut way of doing what we did with the layer mask earlier when we made an adjustment layer. So once again, click your paintbrush. And let's set the opacity. We're going to start at 50 because we can always turn it down. And it's black, so we need to be over here. We need to be inverted, so we're painting onto the layer. And we're going to paint the entire iris. That's the colored part around the pupil, if you didn't know. And we're going to add a little bit into the whites as well, because we don't want to just brighten the iris and not the whites, because that's going to look very, very strange. But at the same time, you don't want to make the whites too bright, because that makes them look very creepy. And then I like to go around the lash line as well at this point. And especially this little highlight here. Everyone, especially makeup artists, they try to accentuate this, has a catch light right here at the middle of your eyelid. So I like to kind of accentuate that because you want your eyes to pop. That's what this tutorial is about. We're going to go along the bottom lash line as well. And if you see, the bottom lash line also has that middle sort of catch light. So the light's definitely bouncing because your eye is inset and then you have the lids. So that's how that works. Talking about anatomy today. Okay, and then we're going to do a little bit on that crease as well. Okay, and so we're going to zoom out just a smidge because another feature of the face is the eyebrow, in case you didn't know. Surprise. But when you really want features on your face to pop, especially the eyebrow is a great way to accentuate that. So we're going to paint a little bit of what we did to the eye onto the eyebrow, so it has a little bit more contrast. Alright, so once again, we're going to click this over here, our layer that we've been painting on. See? Nice pop. Click the curves. Merge the layers. And now we're going to come over here and we're going to do a little bit more detailed stuff by hand. And when I say by hand, it's more like just painting it on instead of doing a big group layer and painting. We're going to do little detail stuff. So over here we have the burn tool, and we're going to shrink it down because we do not need to burn her entire face. And we are just going to kind of softly add in to the eyebrow. You see right here, there, kind of accentuate that arch. When I talked about the light catching on the eyelid here, another spot that is highlighted is the kind of fatty part of the eyelid, which is right under your eyebrow right here. So that's another way to help kind of show you where the light is coming from. See here, we have the light bouncing from the pupil. The light is hitting here and it's going straight down through. So I like to keep that accentuated as well. So although this is not a skin tutorial, we're going to hit the dodge tool, which if you hold down the left key, or sorry, the left button on the mouse, you can see that you have the sponge tool, burn tool, and dodge tool. So we're going to switch back to dodge tool real quick. And we're going to just gently add more pop there and here and down here. And while we have this, we're going to shrink it down a little bit more so that we can add some oomph to this catch light. I'm just painting that catch light, and then I'm going to gently paint along this side too. Okay, then we're going to switch back to burn tool because I got distracted and we never finished with the burn tool. And we're going to kind of go around the areas that are not being hit by that catch light. So usually the top, around the side here. Yeah. And we'll do a little bit in the corners to help accentuate and sharpen the eye. Then along her mascara line. And you can see why people use actions for this, because it can be quite time consuming. Another place I like to use the burn tool is along the eye crease. Here we go. Okay, final step for this, well, we'll darken the pupil a smidge too. Okay, final step for this, we're going to hit the triangle, the sharpen tool. And we're going to shrink it down a little bit. It's at 50% right now. Let's mark that down to like 25, because this this tool can do a lot very quickly. Okay, and we are going to sharpen mainly the eye part right here, the iris, and then the eyelashes. And then the eyebrow. I shrink it down and usually try to do a little bit under the eyelid as well. Zoom out and you can see a very clear difference between the two eyes we have here. We have the unfinished eye and the finished eye. And if you notice, this is very flat. This has a lot of detail and texture. That's what we've done today. And honestly, we all have them, but it's going to bother me, so I'm just going to fix it real quick. Her eyes are a little bloodshot, and I am very, very particular. So I'm just going to use, right here we have the healing brush tool. I don't use spot healing, I just use the actual healing brush tool. So once again, I did that by left clicking and holding. And then you hit Alt and left click, and it'll take a sample of a space. And then you can just paint away any oh my gosh, I can't talk. Imperfections. That's what we'll say. That's not the word I was looking for, but It'll work. All right. And I believe we're done. That is how you get a popping eye. Thanks for listening.